Welcome to episode 2 of the Gospel Works podcast, where we discuss how the gospel applies to work and life. We're your hosts. I'm Aaron Giesler from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is my good friend and critically acclaimed by myself, polymath, Josh M.
Well, thank you, Aaron. It's good to see you this morning. I want to tell you a story about work. We spent a lot of time last episode talking about how work is a good part of God's creation. And there's nothing that indicates that either in eternity or in the creation that there was something bad about work.
So perfection to perfection.
Perfection to perfection. Yet we live in this moment in between, and my experience of work has not always been so perfect. So back in the late 20-teens, maybe 2018, maybe 2019, I forget, I worked for an organization that was kind of spearheading the anti-trafficking movement in Indonesia. And the work that we were doing with a lot of other organizations and with the police and everything was designed to help people that were forced to do work that was not good. Some of it, actually the majority of it, was labor trafficking, which is basically, a lot of it was based on like being in, working on palm oil plantations or being drafted onto these kind of like fishing boats or other kinds of boats. And so you just go a couple years without getting paid.
Modern day slavery.
Modern day slavery. So the work itself was unobjectionable. Just the working conditions were atrocious.
Working conditions, the no pay, the forcedness of it.
Right, yeah, all that was bad.
Yeah.
But in 2018, I think, I went up to Sulawesi with an organization called Compassion First, who does aftercare for teenage minor victims of sex slavery. And so we went to this. We've been partnering with them for a while. My organization worked more on the prevention and prosecution. Their organization is really good on investigation and rescue and then aftercare.
So the prevention of like helping families not know that there's alternatives.
Know that those alternatives, realize that when somebody offers your daughter a job in a hotel far away, you got to really pay attention. And so I spent a couple of days sitting with, 12 to 17-year-old kids who had already worked a couple years or more as prostitutes, basically. And that's about as bad as things get. Like, many of them had used or been forced to use drugs to kind of cope with the situation. And they were trying to adapt to life after that, to try to think about things like maybe getting married someday or having a family, trying to figure out how to do education because they had stopped going to school when they were, in middle school maybe, or elementary school maybe.
Trying to imagine what it's like to return to what you and I would call normal life.
Right. And then most of those kids, because of the way that they were treated by believers, were also trying to figure out what it meant to follow Jesus.
You mean good or bad, treated by believers?
Good, okay. In this case. So Compassion First is a Christian organization.
Okay, great.
And Indonesia is Muslim majority, though obviously the people who utilize those services cross all the boundaries of race, ethnicity, and religion. And it's all the evil in the world, right? I mean, and then these kids, they have these super dysfunctional ways of relating to other people. So a lot of deviancy around sexuality, a lot of manipulative attempts in the way that they interact with other people, because the system Their family system, their government system, their religious system, all the systems, the criminal syndicates had all screwed them up, right? And the work that they did is something that we have to wrestle with. Like, it's not enough in the world that we live in to say that work is good in the perfect state. We have to have a theology of work. We have to be able to talk about work in ways that acknowledge that that's real, that there's thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of girls and boys and men and women that are engaged in activities that hurt themselves or hurt other people, because around the trafficking industry, like, I have friends that were, they were prostitutes, and some of them got tricked into it. They thought they were going to work in a hotel or whatever. Some of them were just rebellious teenagers or rebellious early adults and got into dancing, and dancing went to something else. And then friends that had been human traffickers, and they were just trying to make ends meet and help their family. And then enforcers, and then it's like the circle keeps going out, and there's all these different jobs and all these people that are trying to survive, and in a pretty difficult situation, most of them, some kind of poverty.
None of those people dreamt about that.
Right. They didn't say, I want to be a fireman or perhaps a human trafficker.
Yeah. Like a pimp or a pimp's enforcer.
Right.
Or
yeah.
Any of that stuff.
It's so our theology of work has to acknowledge that evil is real, and we spent a lot of time, as I said last time, we talked about the goodness that's inherent in work. Today, we have to acknowledge the reality that all of us have experienced firsthand. The work is a mixed bag at best, right?
I mean, we talked about how good work is in the two perfect situations of creation before the fall and the new creation. So, but we don't live there.
No, we don't.
And so because we don't live there, we have to talk about reality.
Yeah, we have to dip our toes into fall and the sin, which is not going to be fun, but a poisoned view of work, like our view that work is maybe all bad or it's only cursed or whatever. A poisoned view of work is going to poison our view of our whole life.
Like a poisoned view of family, a poisoned view of sleep.
Right.
A poisoned view of major parts of life lead to a poisoned life.
And obviously the bigger part of a life something is, the worse the effect of a faulty view. Family is a big one. Our view of politics can be a big one. Education, all those things. Work is right up there. We need to develop a better theology of work. One that acknowledges the good, acknowledges the evil, acknowledges the hardship and the very real struggles that come with working in a fallen world, but also that acknowledges the successes and the blessings and the benefits that come from good work.
So in this episode, we are going to discuss some of the ways. It's not going to be comprehensive.
We can't discuss all the facets of evil in 1.5 hours.
Yeah, we're going to discuss some of the ways that the fall, the major ways that fall affected work and our work, and how God's grace has partially redeemed it so as not to nullify what was started in creation or will be in new creation, but how it's partially redeemed.
Right. So we hope that the next hour or so will deepen the way you look at your work. Whether that theology that you have today is biased towards only seeing the good or only seeing the positive, or it's biased towards only seeing the negative. All those things are less than what we hope. What we hope is that today our discussion will deepen your view of work, make it more true to life and more true to the scriptures.
So we did last week, last episode, we talked about work. That's good, because that's what the whole podcast is about. We're going to talk about that a lot. We saw that work is intrinsically good and inescapably spiritual.
And in creation and new creation, spiritual means good. But we're going to find out today that spiritual in this time that we're living doesn't always mean good. We use the via negativa, the way of limits and borders, to define work. It's the things that we do that are not worship, and they're also not leisure.
We saw that creation was designed. It was designed perfectly, but it was not static. It was designed to grow and change. And work and rest are rhythms that were part of God's plan.
We showed from Genesis and then from Isaiah, from Matthew, and we could have gone to Revelation as well, to show that that cycle of work and rest is going to be a permanent part of the creation order.
We saw that rest relativizes the importance of work, that work is not the all-important thing. It has to be paired with rest.
Work is very good, but rest is holy, right? So as we start to dive into the scripture, let's talk about kind of where this podcast comes from. Like, so I was doing this work on trafficking, and we're talking about all the jobs that are related to this work. And so there's what you might consider off the bat as good jobs, like police and investigation and rescue, and the therapists and caregivers that help these men, women, girls, and boys readjust. But there are tough elements in those jobs. Like we see policemen that are, instead of doing their job, they're taking bribes to look the other way. Or there's a great book called God in a Brothel. That's the story of a Christian man who feels passionately convicted by the Holy Spirit of the evils of human trafficking, and so he uses his skills in detecting to become an international sex slavery investigator. And it tells about how that destroyed his marriage and led him eventually to fall into a consensual extramarital sexual relationship. So even good jobs have these negative things, and there's so many parts to the puzzle. The guys who bring in food for the girls, think they don't know that 15-year-old playing on her little fuzzy phone doing dope is not there of her own free will?
Yeah.
Like there's so much there.
I mean, I'm sure they all have to. I think about like there's usually healthcare providers,
right,
who have taken an oath. Doctors have taken an oath to do no harm, and these healthcare workers who get into the field because they want to help people, and they are doing off-the-books healthcare for these young kids. And there's no doubt how this stuff happens,
right?
How they get the injuries they do, how they get the diseases they do.
And it's no easy thing to think about what you should do. Even let's just say a doctor. Do you let these girls suffer with no health care? Realizing that there's really nothing maybe that you can do without yourself being eliminated or whatever? All that to say, like, it's complex. Let's reflect for a second about and trafficking is just an example. All work, I think, has the same complexities. They're just not as easy to pick out, right? So what was your experience of discussion about work from the church, from a Christian viewpoint? Like, what were influences for you? What did you hear?
People would quote. I mean, I grew up in the Panhandle of Texas, and so it was a Christian. It still is a Christian culture. But I would hear things like they would quote Paul: "You don't work, you don't eat." That's it's in Scripture,
right?
So, that we would get. You would hear about the dignity of work. That you would, that it didn't matter if you were, especially because we were, when I say blue collar, mostly no collar. So you didn't You didn't make fun of somebody's profession. There was dignity from the janitor to the guy that picks up cardboard, to the person that does odd jobs, to the banker.
Right.
I mean, that was really a part of the culture and the church. I didn't grow up in church really per se. I went to church rarely until I was 16 or 17. But you just were told, like, there's dignity in work. You need to work.
Mm-hmm.
You got jobs early. You worked your hardest.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted a fair wage. I mean, so what we heard, church, Christian culture, was good, but very incomplete.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying that there was a lot of talk about basically the quantity and quality of work, but maybe not the kind of, and in that sense, the Protestant work ethic that's so famous, but not about what the gospel meant for your work.
No, I mean, no one ever connected it to that. I mean, it was always, work was always good, but why it was good was multifaceted and varied. It was so you could take care of people. So you could, I mean, we also, the Panhandle it's a place where people help their neighbors out. And so you always work, you work so that you have the opportunity to help somebody in need. We had 4 tornadoes hit my town in one night in July in 1992. We got most everything done and everybody taken care of before the state emergency people showed up.
Wow.
I mean, just no one ever connected it as to why.
Right.
So I mean, I would say my view on work is probably better than a lot of people's culturally, but the reason wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, that's something to be thankful for.
Absolutely.
I think we can see a lot of God's grace, like a generous culture, a neighborly.
You're also very far away from any state services.
So you have to rely on one another and
When you live in the Panhandle, you're closer to 5 other states' capital than your own.
Right.
And so those were really good.
My experience growing up, when I re-engaged in church kind of as a later teen, I would hear messages about the necessity of continuing to be a good person, forgiveness, those kind of things, while you work, which is something. I can't remember actually our church talking about the need for work. I think, again, I was also in Texas, so the same cultural Christian foundation where there was just a respect and an expectation for everybody to work. And then I did see modeled people treating everybody like, hey, John's a bricklayer and Ed is a big-time landowner with a lot of funds, and they shake hands every Sunday, treat each other with respect, look each other in the eye. There's, sometimes the folks with money had a little bit more say in the church, but it wasn't because they were looking down on other people. No. It was just kind of an expectation that they were contributing a bit more and maybe had a bit more experience with organizational stuff. So that was good.
But I know, like in our church, that even we saw that if the blue-collar guy, if he was a roofer, the landowner would just say, hey, what do you think about this?
Right, no, that's true. We would see the same thing. Yeah. What was crazy to me, looking back, is that when we went to seminary, right, a good seminary.
World class.
7 courses in systematic theology, 2 courses in historical theology, 4 classes in spiritual formation. And out of all that, I can't remember a single teaching about work.
So I just talked to somebody that finished the THM that we have, and she said they talked about work for 2 class periods in ST 103.
So it's improved.
They also, I think they talked about angelology about the same number of times.
What we're saying is it's incredible how something as complicated and as meaningful and as time-consuming as work gets less attention than, or at least in our experience, than angels, right? Than like what their names are. I mean, I don't even remember what we learned in angelology.
So this is not Josh and I like saying that any of this stuff was bad. It's almost
missing.
like it's so, work is so familiar.
Right.
Just go, oh yeah, of course you need a job. Of course it's good. Of course, I mean, you have no choice, so why even think about it?
And it seems like the people that do most of the theology are folks that haven't had a job outside of the academy or the pastorate. And so they write about pastoral work issues like very well, right? Like, hey man, sometimes you're going to be this is how you can deal with your board. This is how you can deal with budgeting. This is how you can deal with marital counseling. Like, there's a lot of stuff for pastors. There's a lot of stuff on how our educational theories and practices should be informed by the gospel. We don't see that for accountants or plumbers or truck drivers or all the other professions that are dealing with these deeply complex and inescapably spiritual issues. It's just not there.
I would say that maybe professions that are highly organized and have strong organizational groups maybe talk about it better. I don't know that people talk about like Christian accountants or Christian, but I know people in accounting fields and the lawyer fields, they talk about here's how to mitigate some of these issues and here's how to deal with some of these problems. But I don't know that it goes into like what we would consider like, kind of more classic theology.
Well, I've just come across the literature of the 80s in which there was kind of an explosion of work-related theology stuff. And as I was reading, it was because it was the first time where Americans were coming face to face with the fact that researchers couldn't tell the difference between Christians and non-Christians and their values. So the odds that your banker was moral or not was not correlated with their belief in Jesus Christ or not. It was like in Wall Street Journal, because again, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, the assumption was that Americans were Christian still, to some extent. And so when the Wall Street Journal is saying, like, we're facing a moral crisis in our culture, and they're explicitly stating, because Christians' values seem to be degrading over time. For Christians, that was like a wake-up call, and it was a public thing. And so you see like kind of a flurry of books going from maybe 81, 82 to maybe like 80, maybe the early 90s or something. But now it's like it's kind of faded back into the background again. But work ethical issues, honestly, I don't even know that the research is what the research is saying anymore. But I can't imagine that it's gotten better by the fact that we're not talking about it all. It seems like, in some ways, most of us are in the situation of the judges where everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. And we're not criticizing that because we all have to do what's right in our own eyes. But when what is right is unconnected with the larger church and with us thinking together and helping each other and trying to work through the gospel and its applications to our work, yeah, we're going to struggle.
So we have to understand the fall and sin to understand work, because that's the reality we live in. We can talk about the perfection on both sides of work, but until we understand the fall and sin, our view of work is going to be limited.
Yeah. All right. So for those of us who are new believers, Aaron, break down, just give us a background to the fall story before the curse.
It was very interesting. I asked a young lady one time. She was in a Bible as literature class in high school, and she was coming to church. And I said, "Well, explain to me the story." And she goes, "Aaron, you're not going to believe this." I was like, "Well, just give me a try." Like, I think. And she's like, "It's too weird." She said, "Yeah, there were these two people, Adam and Eve, and God made them, and everything was great." And she's like, "And then it goes a little weird because there's a talking snake." So
Like Dr. Seuss.
exactly. And so she's like, Anyway, so she, she told me the rest of the story. So you have Adam and Eve, and they live in perfection. They are given commands to work. They are tempted by Satan to do the one thing they're not supposed to do, to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they are tempted to do it, and they do it.
Right.
So, and when that happens, sin enters into the world. It enters into them.
Mm-hmm.
And
they react very well. I remember that.
Yes, they react well.
What do they do?
They hide from God.
Ooh.
They cover themselves in shame. Because they were naked. They were naked and unashamed. That was every 17-year-old boy's favorite verse. I was doing youth ministry. They were naked and unashamed. Now they are naked and ashamed, and so they hide themselves from one another. So it breaks their relationships. They hide themselves from God. They make excuses to God.
They blame the other people.
They blame one another.
That's right.
They blame, Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the snake. And so a whole series of consequences cascade.
Right. So that brings us to Genesis 3:16. So in the story, God has now found the first couple and the snake, and he's already pronounced a curse on the snake, who's a representative of Satan. Now he's going to pronounce the consequences on the couple. To Eve, the woman, he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
So these are the effects of the curse. This is the consequences. We see the fall changes everything.
And we understand that this is not the complete list of changes, right? This is a story given by God to Moses for our enlightenment. He doesn't, just like all of the creation story, this is not a scientific roadmap for exactly how everything happened. It's a summary of the meaning of things. And so the fall changes everything, not just humans and our relationships with one another or our relationships with God, but the structure and function of all of creation.
Yeah, creation has it says creation yearns for the redemption. It cries out.
Mm-hmm.
But it also changes, in changing everything, it also changes work.
Right, because the work is part of everything.
Yeah, work, we see it becomes harder and more painful because of this fallen state. It was supposed to be a different way.
And maybe still hard. I'm not sure about that. I think probably it was still, there was still effort and struggle involved, but definitely now harder.
I just think about how much, I don't mind working hard, especially if I know that the end result's going to be awesome. And we saw last week that's they will no longer work in vain. Basically, they're whatever you work for, we saw in the new creation it will succeed. So you won't one of the hardest things I've ever done is raise kids. It says, and you won't raise children that'll have to be sent off to war, that will suffer the fall. And so, man, how hard work isn't bad, in my view, if it's going to succeed and do exactly what I want it to do.
Right, but part of the fall is that work can fail.
Yeah.
Right? Your kids can die young.
the company that you go all in on can go belly up.
Right. Your construction project can fail because of somebody else's mistake or calculation error, or it can fail because of a corrupt government official not giving you the permits that you need, or the weather, or banks can go bankrupt. Like crops fail, drought happens, floods happen, natural disasters, plague, all those things.
So the fallen state really messes up work.
Right.
And also, work is harder because we have to work with people, including ourselves.
Right.
I mean, work is full. I mean, especially if you've worked with terrible people, work can be filled with such strife. Everybody knows the laziest person they've ever worked with, and you don't know that person, then maybe you're that person.
Yeah, maybe you are that person.
Working with people is hard because the relationships were broken in the fall.
Even good people have bad days, and then bad people, there are people that are angry or have trauma or whatever. It's just like it's not easy to get along and to contribute together towards a common goal. That's part of the curse.
So our whole world is twisted.
Our whole world is twisted. That means all work will indirectly support evil. I know that sucks.
Explain that, Josh, because how does all work indirectly support evil?
All right. There's a biblical explanation that we'll get to in a second, but if I say this, let's just look at some examples and do a proof from examples or an understanding from it. You can do your best to raise your kid, and your kid could murder somebody. You have raised a murderer. You can hire someone or pay them to cut your hair, and they can go use that money to murder someone. No, I mean, like, they can use that money. A
lot of murdering
going on. No, to buy drugs or to go buy alcohol to feed an addiction. There's no way.
You can buy a cell phone that is made with illegal manufacturing.
Right. You're going to pay taxes, and guess what? Whether you live in the best or worst country in the world, your government is going to use some of that money to do things that are immoral. There is no perfect government. There is no perfect business. There is no perfect person. It's impossible to buy products, to buy services, to sell products, to sell ideas that aren't twisted by the fall.
So a few years ago, we had a guy come in. We occasionally at Grace, not occasionally, occasionally people come in and they need money. And so we vet them as best we can. And we don't just give them cash. We say, hey, you can do some work, and here's a set amount.
Right.
And so a guy came, and he seemed good. He seemed like he just was down on his luck. And a few days later, he came back and said, hey, I need to work again. I was like, okay. He goes, yeah. And he admitted it. He goes, I thought the drugs were going to be, like I think we paid this guy $50 to do a couple hours worth of work. He said, I thought the drugs were going to be $50 or less, and they're more.
Right.
He's like, I need to put in another day's work. We're like, and so we had this dilemma. We're like, are you really going to go? I don't know that
yeah.
Like, all right, I promise I won't.
Ooh.
So we made a promise. So
right.
We also said, hey, we just, we're going to trust him. But
we can do our best to minimize the effects
but that
of
guy
sin.
told us.
Yeah, it just can't be done. Adam and Eve raised kids. Guess what?
One killed the other.
One killed the other, which I assume puts them back at negative because the good one got killed and the bad one is in the negative column. That's life.
So the best we can do is minimize our funding of, our contributing to evil.
Right, and there's good movements, both secular and Christian, like fair trade stuff. That can be, when done well, an appropriate way of trying to say, like, listen, we're going to try to overcome or go around some of these exploitative work practices. There's things that can be done individually, corporately,
Oh, yeah, no, there's even
but
a
it's
couple
always
of funds that you can invest in that they vet
sure.
these businesses for unfair business practice. And
But the thing to say is, in a world of absolutes where there's good and evil, as soon as you get involved in life and work and relationship, you're always dealing in shades of gray because somehow you're promoting evil.
yeah,
A guy named Doug Sherman wrote a good book back in the 80s when the big problem was doing cocaine to work too much because you valued work too much.
yep.
It's out of print, unfortunately, but he wrote a book called Your Work Matters to God. And when he was talking about sin, he said this: there are dozens of sinful and unhealthy motives that affect work. But the point is that these have never been God's intention. These are the ways in which sin has permeated each one of us. And they cause us so often to pervert the gift of work into a vehicle for expressing our sin. And he's going to go on to talk about how we need to really examine ourselves, because it's not just that we promote sin indirectly in others. We express our own sinfulness in our work at times.
I think here is a good place to say, I mean, this happens in lots of areas. One that I'm intimately familiar with is the church.
Mm.
The church has, the church was established by Jesus. He said, on this rock I will build my ecclesia, my gathering.
Right.
And the gates of hell won't prevail against it. But the gates of hell try. And you see churches do incredibly terrible things. I remember Dr. Hanna at Dallas Seminary would say, people do incredibly terrible things for incredibly good reasons.
It's true.
And so even with that, we see churches, sometimes people do good things for good reasons, and sometimes they do bad things for good reasons, and sometimes they do bad things for bad reasons.
Full spectrum.
But just like what Sherman said, it doesn't mean that the church is bad. It doesn't
Right.
mean that God's intention with the church. It doesn't mean that we will go, okay, well, since somebody did this thing at church and was bad, or the church is bad, that church was bad, we need to give up on the whole institution. God made a mistake. God, it nullifies everything else God wants.
Right. Just like the family, like many families have problems.
What?
I know.
That's okay.
Children are born through a painful process. They often experience and cause abuse and harm. That doesn't mean that family is bad. It means that family, as all things, is twisted by the fall, and the good intentions and the good potential that's there is twisted by sin.
In Matthew 13, we see Jesus tells a parable. And it's in verse 24. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. And when the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appear. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, he replied. The servants asked him, do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered, because while you are pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters to first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. That's a little hard to understand. You're in good company.
Jesus thankfully offers an explanation just a few verses later, in verses 36 and then 40 through 41. Then Jesus left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. And he talks about the wheat being the good people and the weeds being the bad people. And he ends up by saying this: as the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age the Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. The point of the parable for Jesus and his followers was to say, it's not possible today for us to judge who is right and who is wrong infallibly. If we try to make those determinations now, not only, to preview some theology, not only do we eliminate people from the possibility of grace and redemption and salvation, we also are going to misidentify some people that are doing things that we're always dealing with limited knowledge. So they're doing things that from a context that we don't understand and out of motives that we don't grasp. And so what Jesus is saying, like, listen, these things are going to be mixed up and they're going to look similar all the way through. But don't worry, in the end, I'm going to take care of it because I know everything. And I am capable of judging the good from the bad and making sure that in those eternal days, in that new creation where you have your chance to live your life, you're going to live it in peace and harmony, and your work is going to be good.
This reminds me of when Jesus' disciples, when they start getting a little full of themselves, and some people start opposing Jesus, and they're like, hey, Jesus, do you want us to call down fire from heaven?
Right, right.
I mean, we can just totally get rid of these guys right now.
Yeah, we're so good, and it works so well, like all the other times we've done that.
Yeah, and but the point still stands with this. It's like, you're not going to know.
You're not going to know. And that reinforces two things. One, you're going to be engaged in this world as long as you're in this world. The point that Jesus is going to make in a different verse is, you're not supposed to run away from the world. That's not possible. You can't build an enclave so pure that you can do everything in a sinless way. You're supposed to be in the world, but you're not supposed to be from it. You're supposed to be living out a different set of values inside of it. And that itself is going to be a sign to the world that things can and should be different from the way they are.
And so all work is affected by the fall. Even work that is easily identified as spiritual, missionary, pastor, clergy, but it's all your work as a welder or a doctor or a ditch digger is also affected by the fall.
To reiterate, God in a brothel, you can read a story of very spiritual work done by a very good person that ends in sin. And it's a story that's worth reading. It reminds me of Paul when he says, hey, those of you who think you stand, you better watch yourself.
Yeah.
So we are going to indirectly support evil no matter what we do. We acknowledge that the world doesn't make sense in the same way that it did before the fall.
My favorite verse in Ecclesiastes is 9:11. It says, I've seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to them all. That's sometimes the fastest guy doesn't win the race because he false starts. Sometimes the strongest guy doesn't win the wrestling match or whatever it is because some guy cheats or tricks him
or whatever,
or he just had a bad day.
Yeah,
we went a little under the weather.
If we were in the perfect situation, the gifts that God gives us would be expressed in a perfect way, without futility, without failure, and it would benefit exactly like input would kind of equal output. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world that's affected by evil. We live in a world that's affected by chance and strife. So you might be asking yourself, in this fallen world, is everything bad all the time?
Sure. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, depends on my mood.
Yeah, it depends on what's happened. No, but so God reaffirms the commandment to work because He said, by your, you will eat by the by working.
Right, by the sweat of your brow.
There's the implication. Hey, work is twisted. You're still going to do it.
And if you, again, go back to Jesus' parable, the manager says, didn't you sow the field with good seed? Now there's these weeds. But he doesn't say, hey, everything is weeds now.
Yeah.
Like nobody took away the good seed that God had sowed. It's just that the field is now it's a mixed bag. Like there's some good and there's some bad.
It's also funny that a lot of people blame God for evil.
Right.
Just like these servants. This was your fault, right?
Right.
Did you buy bad seed?
I didn't check. I guess I forgot.
Thought these were magic names, yeah. No, but we also see that there's common grace. Now, what is common grace?
Common grace is kind of developed in the Reformation. Calvin kind of starts it, and it gets developed more by other people as an alternative to two different sucky views. One is the sucky view that everything is either very perfectly good or perfectly evil, so saved people are only good and unsaved people are only evil. If someone who doesn't believe in Jesus looks like they're loving their family, that's a lie and a deception. They pretend like they love their family for the good that it does them. And if it looks like they're helping their neighbor, it's a lie and a deception. If it looks like they're generous, they're just doing it because they want to be seen to be generous.
Every non-Christian is a psychopath.
It's a psychopath, right? And every Christian, if it looks like they're beating their wife and children, they're beating them in the admonition of the Lord. Right? Like the good is perfectly good, and Calvin and the others were like, well, we're the sovereignty of God and predestination and all that, but whoa, that sounds a little crazy. But then on the other side, the gospel, Jesus' death on the cross, resurrection, forgiveness of sins, that's all cool. But I wouldn't say that it was like necessary. Because everybody carries their own gospel inside of them, and as long as they want to be good, everybody's going to be okay. I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay.
We're okay.
Right? And what Calvin and those that kind of followed after him spent the time and dug into the text.
They did what those other people should have done.
Right, what the other people should have done. And they said, you know what? Psalm 145, verse 9, and a lot of other verses like it says, the Lord is good to all people, and he has compassion on everybody that he has made. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. Bad people sometimes do good things because they're not all bad. They're all made in the image of God. And Calvin actually rooted his entire theology of common grace in the image of God. Like it's a reflection on the image of God. Because humans are made in the image of God, we cannot be completely evil. Like even Adolf Hitler, who's the epitome of evil, undoubtedly loved somebody and did some self-sacrificing things at some point because he still was made in the image of God. And the twisting and the sin was way more.
I always had an issue with, even when I first heard it, when I was a brand new Christian, of like, it was like, I think at Wesleyan at some point too, much, much later, this Christian perfectionism. Yeah. And I thought like, man, at first when I heard it, I'm like, man, that sounds really good. I could just become a Christian and God will just transform me so much. I just won't ever sin. Like, sign me up for that. But then I would meet some of these people that believe that, and it's like, yeah, but I've met you.
Right.
And so, but then made me think like, well, what? So when I finally heard about common grace, it's like, oh, okay, that makes way more sense. And then you study scripture and like, oh, that lines up way more.
Right, with like Job, where you say, hey, man, if you want to look at God's blessings and give them to the righteous and look at God's cursings and give them to the unrighteous, don't read Job, because it's really gonna mess with your theology. God's good to everybody, and everybody experiences the frustrations and cursings of life, and both of those are designed.
Not just evil people get cancer diagnosis, not just good people get promotions at work.
Exactly, and the point of both is to lead people back to God, right? So it's still good to be alive, even though there's a curse. It's still good to work. It's still good to have children, even though those things are now impure. They're twisted to some extent.
So we still have the goodness of God, even in a fallen world. And even, I mean, so goodness exists. It's all mixed in.
In this life, the spirituality and physicality of the human being is the same kind of thing as the goodness and evilness of the world. Like they just come as a package.
To quote a lesser-known theologian, Emmett Smith, the former Dallas Cowboys running back, as he was talking about the post-Super Bowl era Cowboys when he was still playing, he said, we had a lot of diamonds, but we also had a lot of doo-doo. His quote. He said the diamonds were all mixed in with the doo-doo.
Right.
And I feel like this is exactly, like you still see the goodness of God, but it's just mixed in.
Yeah. And by God's grace, humans have, at various times and places, been able to mitigate some of the effects of the curse. Like I was thinking, Heather was saying the other day, she could remember the times of all of her kids, except she kind of had forgotten Owen. I was like, wasn't that the one where you almost died? She's like, yeah, that could be why.
Yeah. Well, she can remember the times they were born, but she doesn't always get the date correct.
Or the year, right?
Yeah.
Year. Yeah, no, so she was struggling with the date and year, but she remembered the time. But I was just thinking, like, the fact that Heather is alive is a mitigation of the curse.
Oh.
In 1500, much less 100 AD, she would have died in childbirth.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Whenever the nurse walked in, she cursed.
Right.
Because of the curse of child. Heather almost, we're lucky she's here. She was here by God's grace.
The life-saving changes in childbirth, but also there are epidurals now, which I've heard are really the way to go.
Big fan. Heather's a big fan.
Big fan. Though I have heard many folks that are against them until they face the curse in its fullness.
Again, to quote a great theologian, Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Everybody's got a plan until the labor hits.
As we said earlier, Genesis 3 and the curse is a summary, and it's examples of the curse. It's not the fullness, but so we talked about the pain of childbirth. If we talk about the sweat on your brow from growing your own food, guess what? I worked with farmers in Indonesia, and I grew up on a farm in America. The sweat on the brow is different when you're driving a tractor to cultivate 250 acres versus when you're
hoeing and raking
or planting rice by hand
with a little tiny handles on those things are not long.
Right, and they're not super sturdy. They break easily. You can't use your full strength. That is a mitigation of the curse. And even the mitigation, sure, it's not all good. Like epidurals have their side effects. The use of fossil fuels in agriculture and monoculture and all those things. It's always a mixed bag. But you can't deny that human life is less affected by the pains and struggles of life than it was, at least in certain places, than it was 2,000 years ago, though we still all suffer and we will still all, every one of us, die.
So as the gospel, the good news, it takes root in people. It takes root in people specifically. It takes root in people through common grace. It helps mitigate the curse. And so we see with the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament that people, like with a Judeo-Christian ethic,
right?
It can mitigate strife in the workplace. It can create more peace. It can create societies that have more patience, and kindness is a virtue and not a weakness, where those things were considered weakness for the majority of human history.
Yeah, it's true, and it doesn't matter where you live or what you believe. You can use vaccines and medicine. Those are common grace. They come from God through people and the creativity and skills and talents that he gave us. And then there's structures that come about from large numbers of believers who have been influenced by the stories of Jesus, the rule of law, and those kind of things. Again, not untrammeled good, still a mixture of doo-doo and diamonds.
Are you sad that I have all the best? I quote the
all the
poet
best
scholars.
Yeah, I am. But then there's the idea that those of us who believe in Jesus today and try to follow Jesus today are going to be living in systems and structures and relationships and with ourselves in ways that are gradually being transformed by the Holy Spirit. And so our marriages are going to look different, our families are going to look different, our social groups are going to look different. And if we're bold enough and brave enough, and the goal of this podcast, our workplaces and professions should also look different because we are transformed by the gospel.
So, to recap, perfection, work was good. The fall, we work under the curse. But the work that we do, while it always indirectly supports some kind of evil, it can be part of the redemption effort.
Right.
So by the gospel and by God's common grace.
Right. So work still has intrinsic value. It's still good, even under the curse. It's a means of God's grace. It's part of God's design. In fact, I mean, it's tough to draw the comparison, but just remember, God kept on working after the fall, and his work was definitely part of the redemptive effort.
Very, very, I mean, some could say direct.
Right, that was directly, but I'm going to have to say this, and if it's heretical, I'll give you a chance to fire back.
All right.
I think after the fall, even the work of God indirectly supports evil. Because this is where I'm thinking, Jesus' work on the cross is only possible because God allowed. If the Son of God doesn't come to save us, then those Pharisees and those soldiers don't have the opportunity to murder someone for being good. So if God's working under those constraints for now, again, as a result of mercy, right? His work allows us to be and do evil, right? When he's giving the law, like that literally locks us up under and allows us to see how sinful we are.
Yeah.
Makes us more accountable, right? And so God does all kinds of work, farming and gardening and clothes making and law giving and protecting.
I mean, I just think of the Roman soldier Longinus, who was supposedly the guy that nailed Jesus to the cross. Was he the guy that nailed Jesus, or was he the guy that stuck the spear into him?
I thought he was the spear guy.
Probably the spear guy.
Right.
So the nail guy we don't hear about. So he crucified the Son of God. But the spear guy becomes a great evangelist.
Right. It's true.
And so I don't have
or at least that's the story.
Have any issue with what you said, like that God's work allowed some evil to happen.
Right. Like I was just thinking, I mean, this just occurred to me actually. I was like, Jesus was a carpenter. Do you think that maybe he built something that somebody used to do something that wasn't its intended use, like slam the door in the face of? He made a good door and somebody used that to just slam it in the face of somebody else. Or he fed all those 5,000 people and then they used the energy from that food to like cuss somebody out or sin of some kind. Like it's,
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that their work was bad.
No. And so we see God works as he sews animal skins together. He's a lawyer. He's a teacher. He's a counselor, a wonderful counselor, some might say. He comforts. He brings justice.
And the work's not just, again, to break down that spiritual, physical, whatever. Jesus is a carpenter for 75% of his adult life, more or less, and he wasn't waiting and biding his time before he started his real work. His carpentry work was good. It was a means of grace. When he made breakfast for people, for his disciples on the side of the Sea of Galilee.
John 21.
Yeah, in John 21. Like, that was a good thing. That wasn't a non-spiritual thing. It may have enabled some spiritual conversations, but that's not what made it good. It was good because he did something that was good.
Yeah.
Now, my turn for a quote from an actual theologian. Dietrich Bonhoeffer,
All right.
famous for...
He's no Emmitt Smith.
He's no Emmitt
Smith. 40 times.
Right, seriously. I mean, I'm sure he was slow.
Okay.
He was a musician, and he had his PhD by like 22.
Okay.
But he became famous because he, under the Third Reich in Germany, he promoted a confessing, faithful church that opposed the plans for Hitler against the Jews, the plans for expansion, the idea that the German people deserved and needed and were the people of God, whose expansion was kind of mandated by God, which the state church was more than willing to fall in line with. And he wrote several things before he ended up being executed by the regime. He wrote this as he was reflecting on the curse, Genesis 3. Even after the fall, labor remains a mandate of divine discipline and grace. Through the divine mandate of labor, there is to come into being a world which, knowingly or not, is waiting for Christ, is designed for Christ, is open to Christ, that serves and glorifies him. But it is the race of Cain that is to fulfill this mandate, and that is what casts the darkest shadow over all human labor. And he captures so well and so poetically here that work is good, and as we do good work, we are preparing the world for the return of Jesus. That's not to say that the world is going to become perfect and that's what's going to bring Jesus back. It's all going to be wheat and weeds till the end. But it's saying that we can, in certain times and in certain places, make the world a better place. Because work is good, even though the curse of sin twisted.
See, and that's not always what you hear from people, though. And you'll still hear, because of, nobody looks at work from the perfection of creation or the perfection of what's promised, the new creation, and goes,
right.
Oh yeah, no work. I mean, all the criticisms we hear of like, oh my gosh, I wish I didn't have to work. Work is bad. Work is evil. Money is bad. Money is evil. That's all informed by living under the fall.
We can say the same way that we say all work indirectly supports evil. I think we can say, and I'm not totally sure, but I think we can say that all work indirectly supports good. And let me defend that a little bit. The prostitute, the sex slave, is still able to have things and to use those things to exercise kindness or goodness. The prostitute can buy food for her children. The drug dealer may pay for his mother's medication. This doesn't make sex slavery or drug dealing or murdering good. It's just saying that the world is so stinking intertwined that even the worst crimes can be redeemed and are redeemed. And that is Romans 8:28. And it's not saying that we see that now, but it's saying that all things are going to work together or be worked together for the good by God. We have to recognize the image of God, however twisted it may be, in all people.
This is where many fall into this unnecessary trap.
Right. So work can either be good or all good or all bad. Both are wrong.
It's all bad.
Right. And then
that's very New Mexican.
And then some people think that work is just a means to an end. Right? It's not good or bad in itself. It's like a hammer. A hammer isn't good or bad. A hammer just is. Work isn't good or bad. It's a tool. But we've seen this so many times as we've talked to people over the years.
Yeah, and I'm trying to redeem my work. Because work intrinsically is at best neutral, at worst terrible. So here's how I'm going to redeem it. I'm going to put my Bible on my desk.
Right.
I'm going to lead a Bible study at work.
Right.
I'm going to share the gospel with my coworker at the water cooler. And all those things are good, guys.
Sure, we're going to work with Christian organization or only work for Christians. I will sell Christian T-shirts or something.
I will contribute to the Christian subculture economy.
Or maybe I'll just use the money that I get from this dirty, evil, or neutral job.
Corporation, yeah.
Corporation, and I'll use that to support good or Christian things. And none of those things are bad. In fact, I would say most of those things or all of those things are ways that the gospel should be expressed. But they're based on a fundamental misunderstanding, which means they're going to perpetuate a false view of the gospel.
To use in a sports analogy, I mean, if you say something like, hey, our job as coaches is to make sure that the players know the plays and they don't get very many penalties during we're going to eliminate penalties. We're going to eliminate missed blocking assignments. We're going to eliminate missed tackles. We're going to, and if you say, well, that's our goal, and it's like, well, what's the ultimate goal? Well, just that everybody has fun.
Right.
I mean, that's like saying, oh, my work is either neutrally spiritual or bad spiritually, but you're missing. It's based on a flawed ultimate flaw. It's like, no. Work is good. Work is part of God's plan. Therefore, we try to redeem it as many ways as possible. And the Bible on the desk, the sharing the gospel, the leading a Bible study, the donating money are all part of it. But that's not the only way.
And those ways may not even be appropriate. Like, hey, you're providing trauma to a person of a different faith that's, young.
Trauma care. Okay, I was like, please don't provide trauma to them.
Right. If you're providing trauma care, it may not be appropriate. It may lead to some bad results or bad outcomes.
Yeah.
If you're providing aid to people, making it contingent on sharing the gospel has had really poor outcomes because people subsidize the gospel, right? Like they're like, sure, I will believe in that as long as you give me this food.
Me those things.
Because for me, what's important is the things, not the gospel.
I would even say like, hey, putting a Bible on your desk, pretty important. I don't know it's going to have much effect if you're working from home.
Right. Or if your character at work sucks. Right.
Yeah, if you are lazy or a bad worker,
So maybe you agree with us. Maybe you're like, okay, fine. Work is good. It's mixed with evil unavoidably. And that I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But I'm trapped in my job, and so that doesn't really apply to me. That's also based on a very modern Western thing where you get a choice about what you're going to do. Because let's be honest, in all of human history, even your choice of where to live and what to do were not individual choices. Like, if you're living in the 17th century England, you're not thinking, I would like to be an engineer and I would like to live on the West Coast because I like the weather better and that would really fulfill me.
Yeah, I like the beach there.
I like the beach, or I want to go to France, or I want to go to even a different part of England.
My town.
Right. Like
those live on the south side of town.
Right,
not the north side.
Those weren't realities. They are realities for us because it feels like and seems like most people do have some kinds of choices. And maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you're like the good kind of stuck, like you have little kids and now your work is raising children. You can't outsource that stuff very much.
I know that whenever, because ministry, you're I don't know, 10 years ago, there was much more uncertainty about my work situation, even at Grace Church, just because of all the stuff that was going on.
Right.
We had some transition stuff. We had a longtime pastor retire. but we made a choice, and we told each of our children, the minute that you start high school, we won't move. Like if you start ninth grade here at this school, we are not leaving no matter what happens. And Dad has to get another job, or we have to shake things up. So we intentionally stuck ourselves. I mean, to just make sure that because that's what our kids wanted, that stability.
Sure. And then there's the kind of stuff that maybe is not your fault. You've got limited options, more traditionally regular options, not the crazy expansive options now because you got hurt on the job, or you have dyslexia, or you have a disability of some kind. Feels like you can't do what you want. Could be stuck because you made some bad choices. You went to a very expensive liberal arts college, got a degree that you found out later was not helpful in getting a job, and now you have to work 2 jobs just to pay everything down and make ends meet, and you feel like you can't quit.
You bought too much stuff.
You overinvested in your house. Like sometimes you just
work 2 jobs.
Sometimes we just get stuck. Like we've made some bad decisions, and you have to pay the piper.
I feel like seminary is one of those choices where you have to work some other things.
Yeah. I mean, not that long ago, I got stuck in a war, right? Like that was the...
No, you didn't start, right?
I didn't start it.
Okay.
I didn't even contribute to it, I don't think. And that was tough. Like that's not an enjoyable situation, and it's okay to feel trapped or stuck. But the gospel deals with this situation too, because however stuck you feel like you are, unless you are listening to this as a slave, then you're not as stuck as Paul's audience in Ephesians chapter 6.
So Paul deals with the most stuck you can be.
The most stuck you can be. He says this, slaves, obey your masters with fear and trembling in the sincerity of your heart, as if to Christ. Not like those who do their work only when someone is watching, as people pleasers, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. Obey with enthusiasm as though serving the Lord and not people, because you know that each person, whether slave or free, if he does something good, will be rewarded by the Lord.
So the Bible doesn't deal with everything.
Doesn't deal with everything.
It deals with the most extreme thing.
It does. Sometimes you get stuck. And what Paul's doing is he's reframing your work.
So how could you get stuck as a slave at first century?
In the first century, I mean, you could be born a slave, you could run out of money, you could come across hard times, you could get captured in war. Like, there's a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I read it.
So, I mean, some of them could be your fault. Like you spend all your money and you have to go into debtor's slavery.
Right.
Some have nothing to do with you. A nation decides it wants to wreck shop, and it wrecks your town, and you're hauled off.
Right. So what Paul does is he reframes work. We're working for God, not for people, because even if you aren't getting what you deserve here, God will reward you later. And it's an implicit acknowledgement that even if you have the best job and the best boss or no boss, you're still working for God. And he's going to talk about that also. That doesn't make being stuck easier, but he's saying you can find the good in your work.
I think so many times in Scripture, we see that a change in circumstance, like a change in you, is not determined by a change in circumstance. I mean, Paul says, even if you're stuck, you work for Jesus. James says, if you have hard times, rejoice in God. He doesn't say, like, rejoice when they go away. And you're going to do that. You're going to do that naturally.
Right.
I mean, we just see this over and over. It's like, yeah, okay. We see we see Peter say, hey, you've been run out of your home, but you live to God. I mean, so you can still find goodness despite being in terrible circumstances and situations.
Right.
And even if they don't change, you are still required to pursue that goodness.
Right. And there are, again, sex slavery, drug dealing, murder for hire. There's some work that isn't good, and that conversation is a lot more difficult, and it's one that I've am maybe more familiar with than most. And it's when you say like, hey, do I need to quit this job today because then my family will starve? That's a discussion for another time. For one, that's an edge case,
I don't know,
right?
murder for hire people.
But we're also not just trying to say, we're trying to say find the good in your work, whatever it is, even if you feel stuck. But we're not saying that you should just suffer in silence. Paul addresses that issue as well. 1 Corinthians 7:21. Were you called as a slave? Don't worry about it. But if you are able to become free, make the most of the opportunity.
And so if you feel stuck, not as a slave, I mean, and I would say most of the people listening to this are not in slavery.
Right.
You may feel stuck because your work is meaningless, because the place you work is corrupt,
Right.
because the person you work for is terrible. You may feel like the work is futile.
Yeah.
We are told to get out of bad situations. Again, I had a friend. He said, "Yep, I'm as high up as I'll ever go because I won't lie or steal for my boss." He said, "I'm going to work here for 2 more years, and then I'm retired.
Right.
And then I'm going to go do something else." So, hey, make the best of a bad situation, but get out as soon as you can.
If you are stuck, you feel like you have to stay in your job because of economic reasons or stability reasons, there are ways to mitigate the curse. There are ways to make some work better or more meaningful. And we can say that as believers, that should be part of our living out the gospel, is trying to find ways to make work less bad. And when it is bad.
My dad is a good example of this. He was a welder at first, which he really loved. He knew it was bad for his health. He was also working a lot of shift work. He wanted to help people. He was working at a refinery. He moved from welding to the safety shop. He left the union. He joined the corporate side. And he said, man, so the safety side of it, they put out they were the firefighters, but they also did all the safety inspections. And he's like, I want to help people directly. Because he felt very, very convicted to do that. What he found is the safety shop was basically corporate shill. He's like, somebody's going to die. They're going to pin it on one of us. And that happened. He saw it a couple of times that somebody was really badly hurt, that it could have been avoided. But to Max, and so he hated the company that he worked for. He hated his boss even more because his boss was, a ruthless, terrible, but he felt stuck because he had 3 teenagers. I was about to finish my junior year. My brother was 3 years younger. My sister was 5 years younger. So he had all of us, and at the plant, at the refinery, you made good money. So he hated it, and it was making him sick. His mental health was terrible, but he was like, I feel stuck. Then one day, an emergency happened. A person, unfortunately, passed away because of a safety thing. And the boss, to make an example, fired 3 people. And my dad was one of the 3. They all went to go see a labor attorney. The labor attorney said, I can get all of your jobs back with back pay, and they'll reprimand the boss. The other two guys, they fought the case. They won. They got their jobs back pay. And the boss got reprimanded, but he didn't get demoted, which is that they were all hoping he would get put back into their level. He didn't. He remained the boss. Just eventually, he did get fired eventually, but it was like 10 years later.
Right.
My dad said, you know what? I hate that job. It was killing me physically, mentally, spiritually. I hated it. And so he chose to go back to school. So he went to school. He went back to, he enrolled in college my senior year of high school. and he graduated my sophomore year of high school. Him and my mom both. And so he said, you know what? He said, God gave me a second chance by giving me this out that he didn't have to take, but he thought this is the only way I will take this out to get out of this work that I hate so much, that is killing me. And he became a respiratory therapist. He worked there as a respiratory therapist until he was 72, and he loved it.
Right. That's a great illustration of, sometimes you just have to get out. And then sometimes maybe it's enough to reframe your work in your head. Maybe it's enough to try to find the good in your work. And I'll tell you, the way humans are made, if you go looking for the bad in your work, it's there, and you're going to find it. If you go looking for the good in your work, it's probably there. And if you go looking for it, you'll probably find it.
Another quote by a scholar.
Excellent.
Josh is this guy's name. Said, the one who seeks offense will always find it. I remember you said that a few years ago. I remember that. And I don't know who said it. I don't know where you got it from, but
right.
But it's true. If you the thing that you're seeking, you'll almost always find.
Right. So let's kind of recap. Creation was designed to grow and change, even though it was made perfect. It fell, and the fall twisted everything.
Work and rest are a part of God's plan for the growth and creation, and even during the fall, even work and rest are still part of that plan that God had.
And it's part of redemption. Work is intrinsically valuable, and it's inescapably spiritual, despite the curse.
Even though the curse is alive and well, God's grace, his common grace, and the spread of the gospel mitigate the effects of the curse.
Thank God for that.
Amen.
God works because he loves to work still. And we work because we are made in his image. And just as a callback, we also rest. Work is not the be-all, end-all of life. It's very important. It's part of God's plan for creation and for redemption. But it's not everything.
Our work is good because as we work, we imitate our Creator. Our work is not good because we like it or don't like it, or because we chose it or we didn't choose it. It's even if we're good at it or not, our work has meaning and value in and of itself. Now, is it better if you like it and you choose it and you're good at it? Absolutely.
Absolutely. God's going to reward our good work regardless of our situation. And work and rest are going to be with us forever.
All the way into new creation.
All the way into new creation. So we would like for you to spend a few moments today acknowledging some of the evil that's part of your work.
Paperwork.
Paperwork, bureaucracy. Human nature is we try to minimize or overlook evil unless we're in a bad place. But today, acknowledge it. The curse is real. It's affected your family. It's affected how you grew up. It's affecting your work. But after you spend that time mourning a little bit about the state of the world, spend some more time thanking God for the good that is being accomplished through you and the work that you're doing. Whether that work is paid or unpaid, whether you're a young mother or a retiree, or you're just going through the daily grind of a professional job. God is doing something good in you and through you. The wheat is there, even though the weeds are also there.
And we're going to leave you with this from Philippians 2:12 and 13. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you and to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose.
Right. God is working inside you as you work if you believe in him. The gospel works. That's good news. Work is good, but it's twisted by sin and in need of redemption. If we can acknowledge that, then we can begin applying the gospel to the difficult task of making our work better and mitigating the effects of sin. This is a work that can only be done in real, face-to-face, life-on-life community. That is a non-negotiable part of the Christian faith. We hope that you find that wherever you are. We'll talk about it more in a later episode.
And if you're in Albuquerque, we would love to have you join us at Grace Church. We're at the corner of Louisiana and San Antonio Road. Or if you're down in the South Valley at Blake and Isleta at Mesa Valley Church.
Thanks for joining us. Next time, we'll talk more about what it means to do theology, which is a requirement for following Jesus, but it may not mean what you think it does.
Until then, for Josh, my name is Aaron, and this is the Gospel Works Podcast.